Hello everyone, welcome to what I think is one of Seattle's newest exciting housing trends, attached additional dwelling units. So what exactly are we talking about here? Well, we're talking finished basements with kitchens, converted garages, or even additional side wings that have been transformed into functional apartment spaces. It's really cool what you can do with additional space that's already existing in your home. So in today's video, we're going to dive in some of the costs to build or purchase an ADU. We're going to dive into the rules and regulations surrounding them, and we're going to do a tour of an example of what you could use in terms of a basement conversion. All right, let's jump right in. Now, first things first, we're going to talk about what makes an ADU, specifically what it is. So the first that I'm going to mention is that there are a couple of different types of additional dwelling units you can have on your property in Seattle. In particular, there's a difference between DADUs and ADUs. ADUs are attached to your property and DADUs are detached, as you can see on the photo here. If you do want to learn about specifically detached additional dwelling units, I have a video linked above that you can go check out. This covers everything that you could possibly need to know about building or purchasing one here in Seattle. So why are ADUs becoming so popular in Seattle? Well, first of all, there's a housing shortage here, so the Seattle zoning codes have changed, allowing any type of single-family residential zone to have DADUs on their property. So what people are doing is they're converting different parts of their property to become additional rental spaces, and this is really great for those who want to lower their mortgage payment or have some extra passive income on the side. Now, the first question I'm sure you may have is how much money can you make on an ADU monthly? Well, what I'll say is it certainly depends on the size and condition of your ADU, but we typically see them go out for about $1,500 to $3,500 per month, depending again on a lot of different variables. Now, these rentals can be long-term or short-term. However, if you want to do a short-term rental, there's quite a few different rules that you have to follow, and I actually have linked down below all of the criteria so that you can see it right from the government website. Now we're going to discuss all the key criteria and requirements for having an ADU. Alright, so first of all, you're going to need to have a kitchen, sleeping area, living room, and separate entry to qualify. Now, in terms of sizing, the maximum square footage is around 1,000 square feet here in Seattle for typical residential zones, but for low-rise zones, the max is actually 650 square feet. When it comes to the count of ADUs or DADUs that you can have on your property, it is typically 2 for residential zones, and that can be a combination of attached dwelling units or detached dwelling units. Now, if you're considering something like an attic or basement conversion, this is really important to know. You have to have at least around 7 feet of ceiling height. To be even more specific, it's 7 feet and 6 inches as a minimum. Okay, so when it comes to the count of residents allowed in an ADU property, it's a little bit different than what you might think. So first of all, let's say you have one ADU on a residential property. The total household count is 8 maximum. And this is if all of the people are not related. If they are related, there is no cap. Now, if you have 2 ADUs or DADUs, a mix, on a property, that max then goes up to 12. Now let's talk a little bit about property rules and things like setbacks. So first of all, with an ADU, the setback allowance is the exact same as the residential building you already have in place, so it follows the same rules as the existing structure. Now, if you are going to build an ADU and you have a tree that you're going to have to remove to build it, there will be limits on the size of the ADU that's allowed. On a similar note, if you have to remove parking to build an ADU, that parking must be replaced. However, you don't have to actually add more parking to build an ADU on your property. And for these rules, we're talking about a designated parking space, garage, or whatever it may be that is already on your property. We're not talking about off-street. Another rule is that all ADUs must conform with egress standards. So this is escape windows and doors. Each bedroom must have something in case of emergency. In terms of actual inhabiting, they are going to follow all of the same rules that a typical residential house would. So think a bedroom is not considered a bedroom unless it has a closet space right outside in the hallway or in the bedroom itself. Things like that you're definitely going to want to look into. Alright, so our next topic of discussion is how much it actually costs to build an ADU and what some of those fees might look like. For the sake of an example, we're going to do a basement conversion. Now, typically when I see these in Seattle, they already have some basic structure and framework, electrical done, and egress already included. So we're going to just pretend like that's already been done for this example. Okay, so when it comes to design and permitting, this can typically cost anywhere from around $7,000 to $15,000, and this is where you've got your architect making drawings, plans being developed, and overall the preliminary draft of the actual structure being put in existence. This is also going to include permitting and inspecting to make sure that you can actually do the project. And that can be sometimes an expensive and or lengthy part of the process. Alright, so next on the list is demolition and prep work. This can be around $2,000 to $5,000 depending on what needs to be done, but very important once you start the process. Now, understanding that you're going to need a kitchen and bathroom, we're now going to talk about plumbing. This is typically around $15,000, but can go all the way up to $30,000 depending on what needs to be done, especially because you need both of those two components and they're not always already in a basement. Now, HVAC and ventilation are also important. This is going to cost you anywhere from $6,000 to $12,000, depending on how extensive the work is. But again, something very important that you're going to need. Typically for newer builds, we see people doing HP mini splits because they are easy to install and quite efficient. So next on the list, we have insulation. Obviously another very important component, and this is going to run you between $3,000 to $6,000. And then you're going to have to drywall, paint, and trim, and this can be anywhere from $8,000 to $14,000. Now, kitchen and bathroom renovations can widely vary in price, but those are two other things that you're going to want to do, and you're looking at roughly $18,000 to $35,000 for a kitchen and $12,000 to $25,000 for a bathroom. And that is just your kind of standard Seattle pricing per the square footage that we're seeing for ADUs. Flooring is another option you're going to also have to consider. Things like LVP and hardwoods can run at quite an expensive price, but are really important if you want to make the home feel clean and homey. And that price is going to run you anywhere from $4,000 to $10,000. And then lastly, you have your soundproofing and exterior work. Soundproofing is likely going to be around $2,000 to $5,000 depending on what you want to do, and your exterior will probably be around $1,500 to $5,000. Again, kind of depends on what you do. These are all variable costs. When doing a project like this, it's also good to have a contingency fund between $15,000 to $35,000 or more, just to make sure that if something goes wrong, you have money in place to finance those issues. So the overall estimate that I have is around $145,000 to about $250,000. Now, take this number as a good estimate from somebody who works in the field, but note that it's really important to refer to a professional builder and architect for more specific numbers. I actually have a link down below with some of my favorites who work in the greater Seattle area, so maybe you can give them a call. Hopefully that information gave you a good idea about what ADUs are and generally how much they cost, and if it makes sense for you to build one or purchase one. Now we're going to actually go check out a house right now that has an ADU so you can kind of figure out in your mind what it might look like. Welcome to the ADU, and this one was built from a daylight basement with a separate entry. What I love about this space is how it has its own private entrance, full kitchen, bathroom, and one bedroom or living room space. Notice how even though it's technically part of the main house, it feels completely separate. That's really one of the keys to a well-designed ADU. Your tenants should feel like they have their own living space, and you should feel like you have your own as well. Alright, so that's what I have for you this week. If you have any questions or comments about ADUs that you want to leave down below, feel free. I love to read those and it helps me make better videos. I wish you a very good rest of your day. Bye.